2 weeks before the 2006 midterm elections, President Bush signed into law the Secure Fence Act. The Secure Fence Act directed the Department of Homeland Security to construct at least 2 layers of reinforced fencing along 850 miles of the U.S.-Mexico border. Members of Congress claimed that they were taking action to prevent the next 9/11, even though none of the 9/11 terrorists came into the U.S. by crossing a land border. They claimed that they were taking action to stop smuggling and undocumented immigration, even though the walls that already existed in California had failed to accomplish this. Though no walls would be built along the Canadian border, and the coast would likewise be unaffected, the Secure Fence Act's pie-in-the-sky goal was to, quote, achieve and maintain operational control over the entire international land and maritime borders of the United States. Congress assumed that building a big, imposing wall would stop crossers in their tracks. It did not. The Congressional Research Service found that the border wall already built in California, quote, did not have a discernible impact on the influx of unauthorized aliens coming across the border, end quote. In addition, the Border Patrol has repeatedly stated that walls only slow crossers down by a few minutes. Less people are crossing the border illegally each year, but it is not because of the walls that the Department of Homeland Security has built. The Border Patrol uses numbers of apprehensions to determine the rate of illegal crossing in a given area. According to their statistics, 2007 border-wide apprehensions dropped by 20% from the previous year. But this decrease does not correspond with the construction of border walls. In the Rio Grande Valley of South Texas, where there has never been a border wall, apprehensions were down by 45% from 2005, bringing them to a 15-year low in that sector. Unwalled Del Rio, Texas, saw a decrease of 66%. In contrast, the San Diego sector, which has had walls for over a decade, saw a 20% increase in apprehensions from 2005 to 2007. The utter uselessness of walls to combat terrorism, smuggling, or undocumented immigration is obvious. Even Homeland Security Secretary Chertoff has said, quote, I think the fence has come to assume a certain kind of symbolic significance, which should not obscure the fact that it is a much more complicated problem than putting up a fence which someone can climb over with a ladder or tunnel under with a shovel, end quote. The price tag for this symbol will be $46 billion, according to a Congressional Research Service estimate. Other estimates have been higher. The Department of Homeland Security continues to operate under the false assumption that if border cities are walled off, the harsh conditions of the desert will deter people from going around walls to seek entry into the United States. The reality is that as DHS builds walls in urban locations, desperation drives more people into remote desert areas where hundreds die from dehydration and exposure every year. The Government Accountability Office found that as walls went up between 1995 and 2005, the number of people who died attempting to enter the U.S. each year doubled. Over the last decade, the bodies of more than 5,000 people have been recovered, and it is estimated that hundreds, or possibly thousands, remain undiscovered. The situation is a humanitarian crisis occurring on U.S. soil. But rather than address this, the federal government is constructing additional walls, which will exacerbate the problem and lead to more deaths. The same landscape that is deadly to human beings is a haven for wildlife. More than 40% of the 1,954-mile U.S.-Mexico border consists of protected public lands, including hundreds of miles within the national park system. Rare plants and spectacular animal species rely on these parks, wilderness areas, refuges, and preserves as their last remaining habitat. Most of these protected areas are now threatened by the border wall. The wildlands along the southern border preserve some of America's most biodiverse habitats. This is not only the meeting place of two nations. Here, southern neotropical climate zones interact with more temperate northern climates. Western mountain ranges feed into Pacific estuaries. Temperate and alpine sky islands punctuate the Sonoran Desert, and one of North America's longest rivers passes through a wide variety of ecosystems before emptying into the Gulf of Mexico. These ecosystems do not stop at the border. The hundreds of miles of border wall that have been built so far, and the hundreds of miles that are planned, will slice through them. Thousands of acres of vegetation will be bulldozed. Floodlights that will disrupt nocturnal feeding and migration will be erected. And in California, a canyon will be filled in with over 2 million cubic yards of earth torn from nearby mountains in order to build the border wall across it. Many endangered species, including the jaguar, jaguarundi, ocelot, Sonoran pronghorn, and Cactus ferruginous pygmy owl, are dependent on habitat along the border for survival. The ranges of these species do not extend farther north, so if the habitat that they depend upon is destroyed, they will be driven to extirpation in the United States or even to extinction.